It is Thursday yet again. How are you, Kevin?
I'm good. I'm a little thrown off. I know we're doing this at a new time today. How exciting. We're kicking off at 1:30 Eastern Standard Time. Usually we do this at noon at our time.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? I know that even with the new time, we're still going to do the same great show that we always do.
Of course. And you know what? If we get good response, we might have to just go 1:00, 1:30 moving forward. Like, I'm
We'll
not
see.
against it. This will be our first show with two guests. We're going to have two amazing guests today. And I'm excited. Let's get right into it. I don't even want to waste time chit-chatting. I was going to talk about our Phillies winning a lot of games since we last had a show, but we're not even going to go there. We're going to go right into it.
That's right. Hit the button. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Thursday Thoughts. I'm here with my man, Kevin Homer, of course, Zach James. Kevin, how you feeling today?
Feeling great. I know we got such a great topic today. This is so important. I know we've got business owners and employees and coworkers, that are going to be watching this show today live on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Facebook. Thank you so much for joining us. I know we've got a lot of people who can watch it after the fact. I don't care who you are, what you do, when you're in the business landscape, this topic is so important. I'm thrilled that, I'm sorry it took us to season 3 before we finally got to talk about this, but let's just jump right into it.
Yeah, indeed. I'm super excited. We have some great guests. Some quick shout outs before we dig all the way into it. Happy Pride Month to everybody out there. Happy Caribbean American Heritage Month. It's also African American Music Appreciation Month. So, June is a lot of things, so shout out to everybody and happy future Juneteenth that's coming up this weekend. But yeah, some amazing guests we have today. The topic came up because we were doing a lot of work with Integrate for Good, an awesome group led by Bev Weinberg. And I said, you know what? I would love to have a show where we discuss neurodiverse hiring. And she was like, that's a great idea. I'm not the person to bring on the show, but I know who is. So I said, all right, I take all recommendations. Please let me know. And she referred me to Cait Rosica over at the Neurodiversity Employment Network. And I'm super excited to introduce her and Emma, who she's bringing with her. But let me tell you a little bit about these two rock stars first before they come here. Let's start off with Cait. So Cait is the director of the Neurodiversity Employment Network here in Philadelphia. And it's a network connecting employers, academics, providers, vendors, job seekers, and other allies in the greater Philadelphia region, supporting one another to enable neurodivergent individuals to gain meaningful employment. Cait has extensive study and research in the neurodiversity employment space, with undergraduate study in business and psychology at the joint program at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and Duke University, which is weird to see those together. That's an interesting union. And a doctorate in occupational therapy from Jefferson University. Cait believes strongly that neurodiversity is a crucial part of diversity, equity, and inclusion, as do I, and is proud to be a part of the mission to further inclusion in the workplace here in Philadelphia. And we also have Emma Billingsley joining us. Let me tell you a little bit about Emma. Emma is a 2021 graduate from Westchester University with a bachelor's degree in psychology and a minor in dance. Emma will be going back to Westchester University for a master's in higher education policy and student affairs. And she's currently a teacher's assistant at Christopher's Footprints, a childcare located here in Norwood, PA. So I'm super excited to introduce these two rock stars to you today. Welcome to the show, ladies. How are you?
Hello. Thank you for having us. Super excited to be here.
Indeed. Awesome. And Kevin, look, I got your head covered up there. Give me a second. I'll take our logo off your face. There we go.
Some people would argue, say I look better that way.
Indeed.
So really, none of these people are here, but some people may say that.
Right. I didn't hear you, Cait. Again, thank you for joining us today. How are you?
Absolutely. I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having us to talk about, like you said, this really important topic. We are thrilled to be here.
Indeed. And I know we spoke before, but Emma, I didn't get a chance to chat with you before. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm currently on my lunch break at work right now. So
Awesome.
this is a way to spend it. So yeah.
I like it. I like it. She's giving up lunch for us right now, everybody. So you got to make sure you're liking and sharing the show. It's great to have you two on. So I will kick it off with this because I know we have a lot of people watching who may be familiar with our topic and also may not be familiar with our topic. So I'm going to just throw it up there and you can start, Cait or Emma. But let's just get right into it. What is neurodiversity? Can you kind of define that and describe that for us?
Sure. Emma, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so I would say neurodiversity is like there are people out there who have, different, like there's something different about them, I would say. Neurodiversity could be anything from like autism to like ADHD, to anything that includes with disabilities. I would say it's the disability community. They also like to consider themselves neurodivergent. I was wondering if you would want to elaborate on that, because sometimes I'm very bad at explaining things.
No, that's a great start. I think you explained that really well. So I'll give some historical background on the term too. But, neurodiversity was a term coined by someone named Judy Singer. And they said, really, the idea is that everybody has a unique nervous system, a unique brain, a unique way of being, and that those variations are to be respected just like any other aspect of diversity. So to me, when we talk about neurodiversity, we are talking about everyone, specifically neurodivergent people and those who might be considered neurotypical, right? So the majority there. And the key point to me is that it's all about respecting those individual differences, just as you would any other variation. So while we might talk about different diagnoses, we might talk about different labels, the big idea is that regardless of what those diagnoses or labels might be, that all are equally valid ways of being in our world.
Interesting. Awesome. So when it comes to hiring and in the neurodiverse space, what are some of the things that most people might ask you about? Like, what are some common questions you might receive?
That's a great question. I'll start off here, Emma. I think one of the most common questions is what we just talked about. Like, what is neurodiversity? What does this look like in the workplace? How do I go about being more inclusive for neurodivergent talent in my workplace? So I think those are some of the questions we're starting to see more and more discussion around, just because really up until this point, there hasn't been as much awareness and education around the topic of neurodiversity in the workplace. So there's really basic constructs of what is neurodiversity, how can I be more inclusive, and what does that look like in action are the questions I hear most often.
Gotcha. And let's dig right into how neurodiversity relates to the workplace in that space. So one question we had here is, why should employers be interested in learning more about and embracing neurodiversity? Like, what is that? Why is that important to businesses?
Sure. Emma, do you want to start off there?
Yeah, sure. I think employers should definitely be interested in neurodiversity because it's so prevalent within our society. There's a lot of people who are either like on the autism spectrum or some other type of neurodiversity, and just like anybody else, they need to survive. And I think it's really important to make sure that we are hiring these people, hiring neurodivergent people, because if we don't, then these are people in society being left out, and when that happens, there's an increased chance of like homelessness and just a lot of different negative aspects that could happen. And so it's really important that employers really pay attention to like hiring, especially like hiring people who are neurodiverse, and to not discriminate against them.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit it on the head, Emma, with saying that, right? I think one thing too is that employers probably already have a neurodiverse workforce, right? Whether or not your employees are disclosing that or not is a whole nother story.
True.
So I think that's really important for employers to recognize, is that you likely already have neurodivergent people in your organization, but your practices might not be as inclusive as they could be. As Emma talked about too, I think a lot of employers are missing out on key talent for somewhat arbitrary reasons, right? So at one point, a statistic was that 85% of college graduates on the autism spectrum were unemployed. And many times, reasons for that might be just biases in the hiring process, like someone's not making eye contact in an interview, and that's why they don't get the job, not because they don't have the skills to do the job, right? So I think employers need to recognize that talent is talent, and you have to figure out ways to create more inclusive processes to make sure you're getting the talent that you want and need. And just that, everyone has something to bring to the table. Everybody has something to bring to an organization. And you want to make sure that your doors are welcoming to everyone.
That's a great point you made, Cait, and I want to dive a little deeper into that. So you gave an example of someone doing some hiring and the person they're looking at isn't making eye contact. And I would assume, and you probably have better stats than me, but the average person doing the hiring probably doesn't have much of a knowledge about neurodiversity, and that could be a sign. How do you go about educating that space? Is that one of the main focuses of your organization? Is that educational piece for the hiring folks?
Yeah, so a lot of what we do is bring together different organizations in Philadelphia so that they can connect with each other in this space. So we have so many awesome resources in the greater Philadelphia area, and nationally, there's other resources who do this type of education for hiring managers, for businesses, who do this type of consulting work. So we as an organization don't do that, but we know that there's so many resources available that if connected could make a really big impact. So that's what we're focused on, is making those connections. And I don't know, Emma, if you agree, but it seems that recently, there's been a lot more education available online conferences. We host events that have different people speak about their experience in the hiring process or how they made their hiring processes more inclusive. So it's certainly part of what we do. And I think it's a growing area for a lot of people who are putting out educational materials.
Yeah, I agree. There definitely has been an increase in educational materials just across the globe about neurodiverse issues, such as hiring, but also higher education and school and things like that. There's been more research. There's a lot of programs. There's been an increase in programs out there for people who are neurodiverse, which is really amazing. I was part of one of those programs called DCAP, which I know the Neurodiversity Employment Network works closely with, which is and it's an amazing program. So yeah, I definitely agree that there definitely is more education and there definitely is more programs out there for neurodiverse individuals, which is amazing.
Awesome. Let's get into this just to figure out how we're going to be making change and making improvements. But how can employers make the interview process more inclusive? How do they actually do it? Let's almost give them a crash course right here on how to become more inclusive in their hiring practices.
So I can start off here, and I think employers can make the interview process definitely more inclusive by sending the questions out before the interview. I know sometimes they might be hesitant to do that because they want them to try to prepare people to prepare on their own and stuff, but it's a little different for people who are neurodiverse, and we can't shy away from that. We can't pretend that it's not different for people who are neurodiverse. So I think it's important to accommodate and send questions out before the interviews. That way it's better, because I know for me, when I've gotten sent questions beforehand, it's helped me a lot, and it's helped me get positions, and I think it's really important to send questions out for interviews before the interview actually happens, because sometimes you can't prepare for an interview without the questions.
Right. 100%.
Yeah. I think that's such a great example, Emma, and such a simple one, right? That a company of any size could implement across the board for all candidates that makes a difference. And like I said, we don't consult in this space in terms of giving advice on how to do that, but I can share some information on what other companies have done and focused on who have made their processes more inclusive. So
Great.
the big giants in this space who first started out were, like Microsoft, SAP, more of the tech giants. And what they quickly realized is that skills-based hiring is really important. So alluding to what Emma said, sometimes all candidates might not be as good about telling you what they can do, right? Especially those who identify as neurodivergent. But showing what you can do is a lot easier and, in my opinion, more effective, right? So if you're hiring a software engineer, do a coding assignment. If you're hiring a technical writer, have them write a piece, a writing sample that's technical. So I think that's been a big focus, has been a skills focus instead of a necessarily talking focus. And right, some people who identify as neurodivergent might not speak using words. So typing chat, making that an accessible option. There's so many different ways that companies have gone about making their processes more inclusive. But I think the major part is that skills piece, that making sure you're assessing what you want to assess instead of assessing how well somebody engages in a conversation with surprise questions, like Emma said.
Awesome, indeed. And I definitely want to encourage folks who are watching to send us in any questions that you may have of Emma or Cait. We have them for probably another 15, 20 minutes. So I definitely want to make sure if you have any questions, you send them to us. And of course, always like, comment, and share the show. So to go into our next sort of topic, so let's say a company is looking to hire, whether they're intentionally hiring neurodiverse talent or they just happen to hire neurodiverse talent, how do they make their workplace more inclusive? Because there's one thing about the application process, but now after that, how are you keeping an inclusive place that is great for everybody of all levels?
Right. So there are a lot of different ways to make the workplace more inclusive, such as that PowerPoint said. You have to provide constant, well, at least weekly feedback to the employee. Sorry about that. You have to give weekly feedback, just because, if they're doing something that's incorrect and they might want to fix it, but they don't know that they're doing something incorrect, you have to make sure you tell them. And to be able to fix that, you also have to be able to let them know how to do that as well, and find solutions with the employee to be able to, just improve their work, because nobody's perfect when first starting a job. You have to make sure you know that, and to make sure also that also delves into the relationship between the supervisor and the employee as well, because it's really important for the supervisor to have a relationship with the employee, and whether that be weekly meetings with the employee, just making sure you're talking to them, and you can't just not be involved at all with the employee unless they're doing something wrong. You have to make sure you want them to grow, you want them to succeed, and yeah. Is there anything you want to add, Cait?
Yeah, I think that's a great thought on, feedback and supervision. I think management is an extremely important part of this equation, both if you have a neurodivergent manager or if you're having a neurodivergent employee under you. And what it comes down to is that individualized approach. Again, you'll hear me say this all the time, but effective for everyone, more effective for everyone. The more individualized you can be with checking in, creating individualized systems, and the more flexible you can be, right? I think what we've seen, especially in light of the pandemic, with remote work and flexible work hours and letting people work in a way that works best for them, is really a good way to think about how to be more inclusive of neurodivergent employees, because that flexibility allows people to set up their own environment. So maybe somebody is sensitive to noise or light and has this sensory difficulty that in a typical office environment might require, switching around a desk or something like that. And that's one way to go about it. Or, remote work, you can look and change your own environment. So I think having that flexibility and having that individualized approach and recognizing that every single person in your workforce is an individual, whether they identify as neurodivergent, identify as neurotypical, or any other factor, right? Taking that individualized approach is going to lead to a better workplace for everyone.
Fully agreed.
Yeah.
Fully agreed.
I think that's so important what you said at the end there, Cait. I mean, I think that's so important regardless of the abilities of your team. You know, everybody works differently, and I think that communication with each individual employee, just getting that understanding of how do you work best and what can we do as a company or as a leader to make sure that, you know, we're supporting you the best way possible. It's just as you said, everyone's got different abilities and everybody's got different preferences and skill sets. You know, the fact that you may have a team member who does identify as neurodivergent shouldn't even matter. You know, I mean, it's just good practice, good business in general.
Absolutely. If we could just, ask every employee over and over, how do you work best? What's working for you? What's not, right? How amazing, productive, inclusive our workplaces would be.
Yeah, fully agreed. I think a lot of times employers kind of want to stay in one lane and don't want to adjust. They think, hey, this is how it's set up, and I can be a little more hands off if everything runs the same way. They might assume that having someone who's different is more work. And I think we have to change their mindset to understand that, the difference is, first off, we're going to help you grow. And second, it's just making sure that you have employees who love working at your business and that you're taking care of them. All of that is going to end up impacting your business in a positive way. I think a lot of times employers don't think of it like that. And I think that's just a mentality we have to change, just pretty much in all the companies who aren't embracing hiring folks of all levels, all areas of neurodiversity. We did have a good question come in from LinkedIn. I'll pop that up on the screen for you.
Sure, Zach. And if you don't mind, I just want to comment a bit on what you said there, because I think it's so important. We know that diverse teams perform better, right? That's
right.
Well established over many, many studies, many looks into companies. And when I think about neurodiversity, how better to make sure you have a diverse group than diversity of thought? You're going to get different thoughts. You're going to get innovative thoughts, right? Someone who literally thinks differently, how valuable is that to a team?
100%. 100%. And it's because the world of diversity, usually when it gets said in the public eye, a lot of times it's really referring to race, when folks are talking about it on the larger scale. And having someone of a different ethnic background or a different race brings in different points of view. It's the same thing across the board for everything. And again, I don't think enough people are thinking about it in that term, in that way, but they need to. So yeah, we have a great question here from Molly Flannery. Excellent explanation of neurodiversity and the hiring process. What does the training process look like to implement inclusive interviewing / hiring? And what strategies do you use to make this a sustainable effort? That's for you, Emma and Cait.
Perfect. Emma, do you have any examples of what you think an inclusive interview hiring process has looked like?
Yeah, so when I interviewed for my graduate assistantship position as a success coach, what happened was I got an email after I signed up for my interview time, which was really easy. They sent a Google Doc with times that I could interview, and I chose the time that worked best for me. And what happened after that, they sent me an email with a document of all the questions that were going to be asked. And so that way I was able to copy and paste them, and I put them in pasted them in a Google Doc, and I just answered the questions, and I was able to have those questions up in front of me while I was interviewing with the employers that were in charge of hiring graduate assistantships. And they asked the questions, and they just asked the questions one by one, but it also might look different for someone who is, for example, hard of hearing or deaf. They might need access to an interpreter to be able to answer the questions, which should also be more accessible than it is now, to be able to get an interpreter. So, or it might look different for someone who can't speak, who also might need to use sign language at that also. Sign language is really, I think, being able to be really inclusive. I think learning basic sign language would do a lot of good for, employers. And yeah, that's just an example of me for my interviewing process, which really worked for me.
Yeah.
But it
I
looks
think
different
that's
for
great.
everybody.
Absolutely. And it looks different, right? Inclusive hiring processes and how it's sustainable and how it's executed looks different for every organization. So Emma's talking about within a higher education context, what that looks like. For a large company, sometimes that looks like a 2-week hiring process with different activities built in to assess competencies. I know Microsoft at one point was using Minecraft in their inclusive hiring process. I know some smaller businesses will use outside consultants or vendors to help them identify, source, and assess talent. So really it looks different depending on what size your company is, what industry you're in, what your company culture is, right? And there's certainly things like Emma is saying that can apply across the board to any company. But I think what's really neat about this space is everyone takes a unique approach. But I'd say the common factors are that typically somebody works with an outside vendor who's an expert in this space in order to help, create those inclusive processes.
Gotcha.
I'll tell you, this has been an eye-opening, discussion. I never really thought about the interview process and, how can I make that part simpler? And, one of the things that just jumped to my mind, we spoke earlier about the necessity of communication with employees after someone's been hired to talk about what can we do to make this, to make this easier for you. And, I'm thinking now, like, why can't that happen before the hire? If we're going into the interview. And, I think it's important to have some ideas of, how we can, make the process easier, but also just, coming out and asking, what can I do to make, we're going to be interviewing next week. What can I do to prepare that will make this process easier for you? I mean, why start the communication after the hire? Let's start now.
Absolutely. And that helps you from the employer end too, right? Get somebody's best self. I'm sure across the board, every company has missed out on quality opportunity. Maybe someone just was stressed. Maybe someone had a child who needed care, right? And was running around in the background. If you can just ask those questions, you can proactively put those success enablers into place from the very beginning.
Right. Cait, tell us a little bit more about the Neurodiversity Employment Network and how they can help a company in this space. Like if I'm realizing, let's say I watch this episode and I realize, all right, well, my practices could definitely use some improvement. Are you who I go to for said guidance and improvement?
That's a great question. So, as you stated our mission a little bit earlier, but I'll just reiterate that really our mission is to be that connector in this space. So we're not direct consultants in this space where we tell you how to make your processes more inclusive. But what we do is point you to all of the different resources that do exist in this space, especially within our network. So while we are not that consultant, we can point you to, say, 6 to 10 organizations that do that type of work in our area, and you can find the one that's the best fit for you. So we're kind of a resource hub as well as a hub of people in our area who are happy to connect with you and share their stories about, how they went about their journey. Really just that first step for coming into this conversation and seeing where you could go next if this is something you want to be better about.
Awesome. And I did actually have a question for you as well, Emma, because you were telling us about the hiring process and how that went for you. Tell us a little bit about where you work and some of the things that you do there.
So I currently work at a daycare right now called Christopher's Footprints, which is located in Norwood. And right now I do different things. I help guide the children with different activities. I play with them. If they're doing something incorrect, I try to guide them into doing something that's more correct. So yeah, I do different things here. I work directly with toddlers at the moment. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit about what I do. I do some other things here too, but that's just a little bit of what I do, and I really like it here so far.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I know in your bio, you mentioned that you're looking to go back and get your master's in higher education policy and student affairs. Do you know what you want to do with, all that extra knowledge you're about to gain when you go back to school?
I don't know exactly what I want to do yet. Obviously, I'll be going back to Westchester, and I'm really excited to go back. But as far as what I want to do, I want to just get through grad school first. At least a full year of grad school before I start deciding, okay, this is what area I'd like to go in. I want to test out different areas of higher education and different positions, whether that be through internship or graduate assistantship. And I want to see like what area of higher education I really like to work in the most. I loved my undergrad degree. I loved being an undergrad and just the whole college experience. And that's kind of like what pushed me to be like, okay, I want to go to higher education policy and student affairs, so that way I can provide that same experience for other students.
That's so awesome. That's great. And I like the strategy. Let me get into there. Let me feel my way around, check some things out, and decide where I want to go from there. I wish you all the best in that, Emma.
Thank you.
Indeed. Any parting words? Any things you guys want to leave our audience with for the both of you?
Yeah, I want to jump off Emma here, what she just said, because I think a conversation Emma and I have had before and is really important in this is that we need inclusive practices in every industry, at every level, in every single field, right? So it's not just that we need, tech is always the stereotype and tech is great. It's not just that we need marketing. It's that we need higher education. We need inclusive daycares as workplaces, right? Every single person who is involved in any type of work can be making a difference in that way. So I'd say that, and taking a step toward inclusive practices is a good step for anyone. You don't have to be perfect. Just taking that one step into being a little bit more inclusive can make a big difference. So just encouraging people to learn more. Awesome.
Any last words, Emma?
Yeah, I just want to say first, thank you to everybody who watched this. This has been a rewarding experience, and also just to say that I'm really glad that there are people out there who want to learn about neurodiversity and how to make the process more, how to advocate for people with disabilities and people who are neurodiverse more. It's really great that we are stepping forward into a world where more employers want to be better advocates. So we still have work to do, obviously, or else we wouldn't be here. But I think we're definitely taking a step in the right direction just by having these conversations.
Indeed. Thank you so much for that, Emma. It's greatly appreciated that you gave us your lunch break to join us and to be a part of this mission in educating as many people, as many businesses as we possibly can. Kevin, I'll give you a chance for some parting words as well, but a quick heads up to all of our viewers. Our next episode is going to be July 21st. My good friend Ryan Paris is going to be joining us. We're talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly of cold calling. So for those who might have a cold calling element to your business for sales growth, this would be a great episode for you to check out. Any last words, Kevin, before we get out of here today?
Yeah, just to reiterate, thank you so much to both of you. Really, really exciting to hear, your perspectives from both sides of things. You both have different perspectives on a similar topic. And Emma, awesome job. I know you started off by telling us that it helps to know the questions ahead of time, and then we proceeded to ask you a lot of questions that you weren't expecting from us, and had a lot of great information for us. Even if it wasn't anticipated what we were going to ask. So thank you so much for all that. Shifting gears, in 3 days, it will be Father's Day. And I know Zach always loves when I end these presentations with dad jokes. And I would be remiss if 3 days before Father's Day, I did not have a dad joke. And, Zach's already shaking his head. He's not happy about this because he thinks that my jokes are all bad. But I need to tell you, Zach, there is a huge difference between a bad joke and a dad joke. And that difference is the first letter.
Emma gave you a laugh.
Here. That closes the show.
And thank you again, Emma, for joining us today on Thursday Thoughts. I am so glad you were here.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.